Darius Carter had always taken great pride in being a considerate neighbor. He trimmed his lawn, waved to the mailman, and never left his trash cans at the curb past the day of pickup. He had envisioned a life of quiet and privacy when he bought his first house in Willow Oaks, a quiet suburb lined with trees, where he could unwind after long days at the hospital and maybe even start to feel like he belonged. The modest two-story home felt like a reward for years of hard work because it had a neat yard and 2 garages. But as Darius soon learned, Willow Oaks came with its own set of challenges. Chief among them, the Homeowners Association and its self-appointed queen, Karen Whitmore. Karen was the kind of neighbor who seemed to be on the lookout for even the tiniest of infractions. She had written notes about how too visible Darius' recycling bin was, criticized the color of his mailbox, and once called the HOA board because his grass was a 1/4 inch too high. Darius tried to brush it off, chalking it up to the price of suburban living, but it was hard not to feel singled out. Still, he kept his head down, paid his dues, and did his best to avoid conflict. That all changed one Friday afternoon when Darius came home early from a long shift, hoping to catch a nap before dinner. He noticed something odd as he pulled into his driveway. His garage door was open, and a silver SUV that he only too well remembered was parked in the middle of his garage. He parked at the curb, heart pounding, and walked up the drive. The SUV's engine was off, but the driver's seat was empty. Darius stepped inside the garage, calling out, "Hello?" No answer. He checked the side door, which was shut. He walked around to the backyard, hoping to see Karen there. But there was nothing there. Darius looked out the window of the SUV as he returned to the garage, confused and increasingly irritated. Karen's purse sat on the passenger seat, her sunglasses on the dash. In case of emergency, he took a few pictures with his phone. As he stood there, the side door to his house opened, and Karen herself stepped out, holding a clipboard and a tape measure. When she saw Darius, she jumped, but she quickly settled down. Darius, "Oh my, I was just checking the setback on your fence. HOA business, you know. I needed a place to park, and your driveway was full." Darius stared at her, incredulous. "You parked in my garage?" As if it were the most natural thing in the world, Karen waved her hand. "Well, I figured you wouldn't mind because I couldn't block the street. I'll be out of your way in a minute." Darius took a deep breath. Try and keep his voice steady. "Karen, you can't just let yourself into my garage. That is intruding." She bristled, her tone sharpening. "Excuse me? I am the president of the HOA. I am entitled to conduct compliance inspections of properties. If you have a problem, take it up with the board." Darius felt his patience wane and shook his head. "Karen, you are not above the law. Move your car. Now!" She huffed, muttering about ungrateful neighbors, and stomped back to the SUV. But as she fumbled for her keys, Darius had an idea. He walked to the garage door opener, pressed a button, and watched as the door slid shut with a satisfying thud. He grabbed a heavy-duty chain and padlock from his workbench, leftover from a recent home improvement project, and looped it through the handles, snapping the lock shut. Karen, still inside the garage, stared at him through the window, her mouth open in shock. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, pounding on the glass. Now at peace, Darius folded his arms. "You wanted to park in my garage? You are now free to remain there until the police arrive." Karen's brow furrowed. "This is impossible. I'll call the cops." Darius shrugged. "Go ahead. I'll be here waiting for you." Within minutes, Karen was on her phone, pacing inside the garage, her voice rising in pitch as she explained emergency to the 911 dispatcher. Darius sat on the porch, sipping a bottle of water and texting his friend Jamal the whole story. A small group of neighbors soon gathered on the sidewalk as a result of commotion, whispering and observing Karen's ranting and raving from behind the locked door. Darius gave the police a calm explanation and showed them the photos, the chain, and the HOA notices that Karen had left over months when they finally arrived. The officers listened, then turned to Karen, who was now red-faced and sputtering about abuse and false imprisonment. The lead officer shook his head. "Ma'am, you were trespassing. He has every right to secure his property. Next time, don't park in someone else's garage." Karen was forced to apologize, her pride wounded, as the officers helped her remove the chain and back her SUV out of the garage. Darius watched her go, a sense of satisfaction settling over him. He knew this wasn't the end of Karen's antics, but for once, he'd stood his ground, and the whole neighborhood had seen it. The weekend after the garage incident, the story spread through Willow Oaks like wildfire, carried on a breeze of neighborhood gossip, and amplified by every group chat and backyard barbecue. Darius found himself the reluctant center of attention, with neighbors stopping him on his morning jog to ask, "Did you really lock Karen in your garage?" Or, "Man, I wish I'd seen her face." Even the usually reserved mister. Darius was watering his roses when Patel from 2 doors down gave him conspiratorial wink. For the first time since moving in, Darius felt a sense of camaraderie with his neighbors, a shared understanding that maybe, just maybe, the HOA president's reign of petty terror was coming to an end. However, Karen was not one to ignore a public embarrassment. Darius awoke on Monday morning to find a bright yellow violation notice taped his front door. The notice cited him for improper use of security devices and creating a hostile environment. Darius was arrested. The notice stated that the homeowner would have to appear before the HOA board and pay a $500 fine. Darius rolled his eyes, snapped a photo, and added it to his growing digital folder labeled Karen Nonsense. He called his friend Jamal, who was a lawyer, and explained the situation. Jamal laughed so hard he nearly dropped his phone. "She's got nothing, man. You are entitled to protect your possessions. If she tries to escalate, let me know. I'd love to see her try to explain this in court." Darius felt reassured, but he knew Karen wouldn't stop there. Sure enough, that afternoon, she called an emergency HOA meeting, inviting the entire neighborhood to discuss recent events and the importance of community standards. Partly out of curiosity and partly to ensure that his side of the story was heard, Darius made the decision to attend. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a beige building with folding chairs and the faint smell of old coffee. Karen stood at the front, her hair perfectly coiffed, her expression a mask of wounded authority. She launched into a speech about respect for rules and the dangers of vigilantism, painting herself as a victim of an unprecedented act of aggression. Darius waited until she finished, then stood up, holding the violation notice in one hand and his phone in the other. With a calm but firm tone, he said, "I'd like to clarify a few things. Karen first broke into my garage without my permission. That's trespassing. Second, after requesting her departure, I secured my possessions. I have photos, timestamps, and witnesses. If anyone here thinks I was out of line, I'm happy to discuss it." The room was silent for a moment. Then a few people nodded, and someone in the back muttered, "About time." Karen tried to regain control, but the mood had shifted. A number of neighbors spoke up and told their own stories of Karen's overreach, including notes about ornaments of the lawn, threats about decorations for the holidays, and even complaint about a child's lemonade stand. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Karen's authority was crumbling. Darius's fine was revoked by board vote, and a motion was made to examine the HOA's enforcement policies. Darius was surrounded by neighbors who gave him high fives and words of encouragement as Karen stormed out, her cheeks flushing with anger. Over the next few days, Darius noticed a change in the neighborhood. Friendly, more willing to converse over the fence or wave from their driveways, people appeared. A few even invited him over for dinner, eager to welcome him more fully into the community. Darius accepted, grateful for the chance to build real connections after months of feeling like an outsider. But Karen wasn't finished. She started a campaign of small retaliation against Darius, making anonymous complaints to the city about his trash cans, calling animal control about a barking dog he didn't own, and even spreading rumors that he was running a criminal business from his garage. Each time, Darius responded with patience and documentation, never losing his cool. He kept Jamal in the loop, and together they built a case against Karen for harassment. The final straw came when Karen, in a fit of pique, parked her SUV in front of Darius's driveway, blocking him in for hours. Darius called the police, who ticketed and towed her car, much to the delight of the watching neighbors. That evening, Darius sat on his porch, sipping sweet tea and watching the sunset, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in months. While he was aware that Karen would never alter, He was also aware that he did not have to face her challenges alone. The neighborhood had his back now, and for the first time, Willow Oaks truly felt like home. As summer deepened and the days grew longer, Darius found himself settling into a new rhythm in Willow Oaks, one that was no longer defined by Karen's constant surveillance, but by the small joys of community and the satisfaction of standing his ground. The garage incident had become neighborhood legend, retold at block parties and over backyard fences, and Darius's once cautious neighbors now greeted him with easy smiles and invitations to barbecues. He joined the local basketball game at the park, helped Mrs. Patel fix her leaky garden hose, and even started a weekend book club with a few other residents who, like him, had once felt on the outside looking in. The sense of belonging was new and welcome, but Darius never let his guard down completely. Karen, though publicly chastened, was still a presence, her SUV prowling the streets, her eyes peering from behind lace curtains, her voice occasionally raised in complaint at HOA meetings. She filed a formal grievance with the board, accusing Darius of creating a hostile environment and inciting division, but the board, now emboldened by the support of the community, dismissed her claims with little fanfare. Darius, for his part, kept meticulous records of every interaction, every note, every complaint, determined to protect himself from any future escalation. He also began to take a more active role in the HOA, attending meetings regularly and volunteering for the landscaping committee. His calm demeanor and willingness to listen won him allies, and soon he was helping to draft new guidelines for neighborly conduct, rules that emphasized respect, communication, and fairness over arbitrary enforcement. The changes were slow, but they were real, and Darius took pride in knowing he was helping to shape the community for the better. Meanwhile, Karen's influence continued to wane. More and more residents came forward with stories of her overreach, fines for wind chimes, threats over mailbox colors, even a bizarre campaign against solar-powered garden lights. The board, tired of her antics and eager to restore harmony, voted to limit the president's unilateral power and established a grievance committee to handle disputes more transparently. Karen, furious at the loss of control, began to isolate herself, her once loyal supporters drifting away as the neighborhood embraced a new spirit of cooperation. But just as Darius thought the worst was behind him, Karen made one last desperate play. Late one evening, as Darius returned from a run, he found his garage door open and Karen's SUV parked inside once again. She was not alone this time. Her adult son, a hefty man with a chip on his shoulder, stood with his arms crossed beside her. "We're here to inspect for code violations," Karen announced, waving a sheaf of papers. "You're required to let us in." Darius shook his head, tired but determined. "You have no authority here. Leave now or I'll call the police." Karen's son stepped forward, trying to intimidate, but Darius stood his ground, phone in hand, already dialing 911. His address was recognized by the dispatcher, who assured him that officers were on their way. 2 flashing squad cars arrived in a matter of minutes. After hearing both sides and looking over Darius's evidence, the officers once more sided with him. The officers advised Karen and her son that any further trespassing would result in charges, and they ordered them to leave. As they drove away, Karen's son glared at Darius, but Darius simply nodded, unbothered, to address the incident. The board called an emergency meeting the following day. Residents packed the clubhouse, many voicing their frustration with Karen's behavior and expressing support for Darius. After a heated discussion, the board voted to censure Karen and remove her from her position as HOA president. A new election was scheduled, and for the first time, Darius considered running for a seat on the board, not out of spite, but out of a genuine desire to help his neighbors and ensure that no one else would have to endure what he had. As the meeting ended, neighbors approached Darius to thank him for his courage and perseverance. He smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief. The battle with Karen had been exhausting, but it had also brought the community together, forging bonds that would last long after the drama faded. That night, as Darius locked his garage and turned out the lights, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had asserted himself, improved his neighborhood, and ultimately found his place in Willow Oaks. Autumn arrived in Willow Oaks with a gentle chill and a blaze of color, the trees lining the streets turning gold and crimson as the neighborhood settled into a new era, one marked by a sense of unity and respect that had been hard-won through months of conflict and conversation. Darius, now a familiar and welcome face at every community event, found himself reflecting on how much had changed since the day he'd first discovered Karen's SUV in his garage. The story had become a kind of local folklore, a reminder of what could happen when someone stood up to bullying and refused to be intimidated. After Karen's removal as HOA president, the board elections brought a wave of new energy. Darius, encouraged by his neighbors, decided to run for a seat and was elected with overwhelming support. His first act as a board member was to propose a good neighbor policy, a simple set of guidelines that emphasized communication, mutual respect, and the importance of resolving disputes face-to-face before escalating to formal complaints. The policy passed unanimously, and Darius was asked to chair the new grievance committee, a role he accepted with humility and determination. Under his leadership, the committee handled issues with empathy and fairness, helping to mediate everything from fence line disagreements to noise complaints, and gradually, the neighborhood's culture shifted. People began to talk to each other more, to offer help instead of criticism, to see each other as neighbors rather than adversaries. Even Karen, after a period of sulking and isolation, began to soften. She approached Darius one afternoon as he was raking leaves, her posture awkward but her voice sincere. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her eyes downcast. "I let things get out of hand. I hope we can move on." Darius accepted her apology, offering a handshake and a smile. "We all make mistakes," he replied. "What matters is how we fix them." The gesture was small, but it marked a turning point. Karen gradually rejoined the community, this time as a participant rather than a dictator, and while she never quite lost her penchant for order, she learned to temper it with kindness. The neighborhood flourished. Block parties became regular events. Children played freely in the streets, and the annual holiday decorating contest was more about fun than competition. Darius's garage, once the site of so much drama, became a gathering place for friends and neighbors, a symbol of the community's resilience and growth. He held cookouts, assisted with charity drives, and even established a tool-sharing program that saved everyone money and time. Through it all, Darius remained grateful for support he'd received and proud of the changes he'd helped bring about. He knew that standing up to Karen had been about more than just a parking dispute. It had been about claiming his place in the world, about demanding respect, and about showing others that it was possible to change things for the better. As the first snowflakes of winter drifted down, Darius stood on his porch, watching the lights twinkle in the windows of houses up and down the street. Knowing that Willow Oaks was truly his home gave him a quiet joy as well as a profound sense of belonging. He had won the battles of his past, but the lessons he had learned remained. Never let anyone take away your dignity. Always do what is right, and keep in mind that even the smallest act of bravery can inspire a community to come together. Darius grinned as he shut the garage door for the night, aware that he had not only safeguarded his residence, but also contributed to its improvement for his neighbors.